December 7, 1944. A Japanese sniper positioned in the dense jungle of Leyte Island had American Marines pinned down for over 3 hours. He had already killed 2 men and wounded 4 others. His Type 38 Arisaka rifle, a weapon he had trained with since 1937, required him to work the bolt after every shot, a 5-round internal magazine limiting his sustained fire. Then something happened that would be repeated thousands of times across the Pacific. A young Marine private, barely 20 years old, raised his rifle and fired 8 shots in less than 10 seconds. All 8 rounds found their mark in a concentrated area no larger than a dinner plate at 100 yards. The sniper's position went silent forever. The Japanese soldier never understood what killed him. He died believing he faced an entire squad when in reality, it was one American with one rifle, the M1 Garand. What followed wasn't just a tactical advantage but a psychological revolution that would fundamentally alter infantry combat and contribute to Japan's ultimate defeat in ways that historians are only now fully appreciating. The Pacific War's outcome was determined not merely by grand strategy or industrial capacity, but by a weapon that weighed 9.5 pounds and could be carried by every American rifleman. The M1 Garand represented a technological leap so significant that it essentially armed each infantryman with the firepower of an entire squad of enemy soldiers. To understand the revolution, one must first understand what came before. In 1941, when the Pacific War began, the standard infantry rifle for nearly every army in the world operated on the same principle that had dominated warfare since the 1890s, the bolt-action rifle. The Japanese Type 38 and Type 99 Arisaka rifles, the British Lee Enfield, even the legendary German Mauser, all required the soldier to manually work a bolt mechanism between shots. The mathematics of this system were straightforward and deadly. A highly trained rifleman could fire perhaps 15 aimed shots per minute with a bolt-action rifle. In combat conditions, with adrenaline, fear, and incoming fire affecting performance, this rate typically dropped to 10 to 12 rounds per minute. The Japanese soldier, trained in the philosophy of one shot, one kill, excelled at this type of warfare. Their doctrine emphasized marksmanship, fieldcraft, and the spiritual discipline of Bushido to overcome material disadvantages. Then came the M1 Garand, adopted by the United States Army in 1936 and by the Marine Corps shortly thereafter. The weapon operated on a completely different principle. Instead of manually working a bolt, the rifle used gas pressure from each fired round to automatically eject the spent cartridge and chamber a new one. The shooter simply aimed and pulled the trigger. Again. And again. And again. The immediate tactical impact was staggering. A rifleman with an M1 Garand could fire 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute, nearly 4 times the rate of a bolt-action rifle. But the true revolution went far deeper than simple rate of fire. The semi-automatic operation meant American soldiers could maintain their sight picture, keep their cheek on the stock, and keep their eyes on the target through multiple shots. Japanese soldiers, by contrast, had to break their shooting position after every round, lifting their head, working the bolt, reacquiring the target, and only then firing again. In the crucial first seconds of contact, when battles were won or lost, this difference meant everything. The M1 Garand fired the .30-06 Springfield cartridge from an 8-round N-block clip. When the 8th round was fired, the empty clip ejected automatically with a distinctive ping sound, and the soldier could immediately reload and continue firing. The entire reload process took a trained rifleman approximately 3 to 4 seconds. A Japanese soldier reloading his 5-round Arisaka required comparable time, but did so more frequently and had to manually work the bolt with each shot afterward. Field reports from early Pacific engagements began documenting an unexpected phenomenon. Japanese soldiers who had demonstrated exceptional courage in China were breaking contact and retreating when facing American rifle fire. Intelligence officers initially attributed this to superior American training or morale. The truth was more fundamental. Japanese infantry were experiencing fire volumes they had never encountered before. August 7, 1942. The first major American offensive of the Pacific War began when 11,000 Marines landed on Guadalcanal. Among their equipment was a rifle that most Japanese commanders had never heard of and certainly had never faced in combat. What followed over the next 6 months would fundamentally alter Japanese tactical planning for the remainder of the war. The Japanese soldiers defending Guadalcanal were veterans of campaigns in China and Malaya. They had faced Chinese nationalist forces armed with a mixture of rifles, many dating to the early 20th century. They had overrun British positions in Malaya and Singapore with tactics emphasizing night attacks, infiltration, and close combat where superior Japanese training and fighting spirit had proven decisive. Then they encountered Americans armed with M1 Garands. Marine Corps records from the Guadalcanal campaign document what intelligence officers termed unexpected enemy behavioral patterns. Japanese forces that had successfully executed night infiltration attacks against British and Chinese positions were being decimated when attempting the same tactics against American lines. After-action reports described scenes that seemed impossible given previous Japanese combat performance. On the night of August 21, 1942, the Battle of the Tenaro River demonstrated the M1 Garand's devastating effectiveness. Japanese Colonel Kaineo Ichiki led approximately 900 troops in a night assault against Marine positions, employing tactics that had succeeded brilliantly in previous campaigns. His forces advanced in small groups, using darkness and jungle noise to mask their approach, planning to overwhelm American positions in close combat. What Ichiki hadn't calculated was that every Marine in the defensive perimeter carried a weapon capable of sustained rapid fire. When Japanese forces were detected approximately 50 yards from Marine lines, the response wasn't measured rifle fire from bolt-action weapons, it was a storm of semi-automatic fire that created an impenetrable wall of bullets. Marines could fire continuously without breaking their shooting positions, maintaining aimed fire even as Japanese soldiers closed the distance. The battle lasted less than an hour. Of Ichiki's 900 men, approximately 800 were killed. Marine casualties were 44 killed and 71 wounded. The disparity was so extreme that subsequent intelligence analysis initially suspected the Japanese had been poorly trained or demoralized. The truth emerged only through interrogation of the few prisoners taken. The Japanese had been shocked by American fire volume and accuracy. A captured Japanese diary, translated by Marine intelligence, contained an entry that would be repeated in various forms throughout the war: the Americans have a new rifle. It fires as fast as a machine gun but is accurate like a rifle. We cannot advance against such fire. Our attacks that succeeded in Malaya and China are suicide here. The lesson reached Imperial Japanese Army headquarters in Tokyo by late September 1942. Combat reports from Guadalcanal described American rifle fire rates that seemed impossible. Japanese weapons experts initially dismissed these reports as exaggerations from stressed troops. Only when multiple independent accounts confirmed the same observations did Japanese military leadership begin to understand they faced a fundamental weapons disadvantage. Japanese Army Technical Bureau documents, captured after the war, show that by October 1942, they had obtained samples of the M1 Garand through battlefield recovery. Their analysis confirmed their worst fears. The weapon represented a generation ahead of anything in Japanese service or development. More critically, Japanese industrial capacity could not produce a comparable weapon even if they had possessed the design. General Harakichi Hyakutake, commanding Japanese forces on Guadalcanal, adjusted his tactics in response to the M1 Garand's firepower. His operations orders from November 1942, captured by American forces, specifically addressed enemy rapid-fire rifles and mandated longer approach distances and more dispersed formations. These tactical adjustments, however, merely reduced casualties rather than solving the fundamental problem. By mid-1943, something unexpected was appearing in American intelligence reports from across the Pacific Theater. Japanese prisoners, rare as they were, and captured documents revealed that Imperial Japanese Army soldiers had developed a specific fear of American riflemen that went beyond normal combat anxiety. They had begun calling the M1 Garand the weapon that shoots 8 times and American riflemen 8-shot soldiers. This psychological dimension proved as significant as the weapon's tactical advantages. Japanese military culture emphasized spiritual strength, the concept of Yamato Damashii, the spirit of Japan, as a force that could overcome material disadvantages. For 3 years, from China to Malaya to the Dutch East Indies, this philosophy had seemingly been validated. Japanese forces had consistently defeated larger, sometimes better equipped opponents through superior tactics, training, and fighting spirit. The M1 Garand shattered this psychological framework. No amount of spiritual strength could overcome the simple mathematics of facing 4 times the volume of fire. Japanese soldiers who had been trained to believe their determination made them superior found themselves unable to close with an enemy who could maintain continuous accurate fire. Marine Corps intelligence documents from the Tarawa operation in November 1943 contained interrogation reports that revealed the weapon's psychological impact. One of the few Japanese prisoners taken during that brutal battle, a sergeant who had fought in China since 1938, provided testimony that American intelligence initially struggled to believe. He described how Japanese defensive tactics at Tarawa had been specifically modified based on reports of the American rifle. Instead of mobile defense and counterattacks, tactics that had worked against other opponents, Japanese commanders had emphasized fortified positions and artillery fire. They had concluded that infantry maneuver against American rifle squads was simply too costly. This represented a fundamental admission: Japanese infantry could not match American infantry in mobile combat. The psychological effect extended beyond individual soldiers to command decisions. Japanese battle plans captured during operations in 1944 consistently show adjustments to account for American firepower advantages. Attack orders specified longer artillery preparation than previously used. Defense orders emphasized concrete fortifications rather than fighting positions. Night attack timings were pushed later to reduce the time American forces would have to respond with aimed fire. On Peleliu in September 1944, Japanese commander Colonel Kunio Nakagawa had studied every American assault since Guadalcanal. His defensive plan, documented in orders captured after the battle, explicitly stated, American rapid-fire rifles make traditional infantry tactics ineffective. We will not waste our soldiers in mobile defense. Instead, Nakagawa's forces remained in fortified caves and concrete bunkers, fighting a static defense that prioritized survival over the traditional Japanese emphasis on offensive spirit. This tactical shift, from mobile, aggressive infantry tactics to static, fortification-based defense, represented the M1 Garand's most profound strategic impact. The weapon had forced the entire Japanese army to abandon tactical doctrines they had spent decades developing. American intelligence officer Major Frank Hoff noted in his report, "The enemy has adapted his tactics to avoid direct infantry engagement with our rifle squads wherever possible." The adaptation, however, came too late and couldn't overcome the fundamental problem. Even fortified positions eventually had to be cleared by infantry assault, and when that moment came, American riflemen with M1 Garands maintained a decisive advantage in close combat. The weapon had created a situation where Japanese forces could not effectively attack American positions, yet could not prevent Americans from ultimately overrunning their defenses. Perhaps most significantly, the M1 Garand affected Japanese military morale in ways that cascaded through their entire force structure. When frontline soldiers believed they faced an insurmountable weapons disadvantage, this perception filtered back to rear area troops, replacement battalions, and even civilian militias being trained for homeland defense. By 1945, Japanese defensive planning for the expected invasion of the home islands explicitly acknowledged that Japanese infantry would be outgunned in small unit combat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Behind every M1 Garand carried by an American soldier in the Pacific stood a manufacturing achievement that Japan could never replicate. The weapon's dominance wasn't merely about superior design, it was about industrial capacity operating at a scale that Japanese planners had fatally underestimated when they attacked Pearl Harbor. The Springfield Armory in Massachusetts and Winchester Repeating Arms Company produced M1 Garands at a combined rate that peaked at over 600,000 rifles per year by 1943. Each rifle required 47 separate machining operations, involved components made from various steel alloys, and demanded quality control standards that ensured interchangeability of parts across millions of weapons. This wasn't just manufacturing, it was precision mass production of a complex semi-automatic weapon. Japanese ordnance factories, by contrast, struggled to produce sufficient quantities of their simpler bolt-action Arisaka rifles. Intelligence reports compiled by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey after the war revealed that Japanese rifle production never exceeded 200,000 units annually, and quality control problems increased dramatically after 1943 as bombing disrupted supply chains and skilled workers were drafted for combat duty. The disparity extended beyond the rifles themselves to the entire logistics infrastructure. Each M1 Garand required specific ammunition, the .30-06 Springfield cartridge loaded to precise specifications for semi-automatic operation. American factories produced this ammunition at a rate exceeding 8 billion rounds annually by 1944. The ammunition was shipped across the Pacific in weatherproof packaging, stored in climate-controlled facilities, and distributed through a supply network that ensured every frontline Marine had hundreds of rounds available. Japanese ammunition production, hampered by resource shortages and bombing, couldn't keep pace even with the demands of their simpler bolt-action rifles. Captured Japanese documents from late 1944 show units being rationed to as few as 30 rounds per rifleman for major defensive operations. Some units received ammunition manufactured as early as 1905, with predictable effects on reliability and accuracy. Marine Corps supply officers documented another crucial advantage: the M1 Garand's durability in tropical conditions. The rifle was designed with large tolerances that allowed it to function even when dirty, wet, or corroded. Salt spray, jungle humidity, volcanic dust, environmental factors that severely affected other weapons, had minimal impact on the M1 Garand's operation. Marines reported that the rifle could be submerged during amphibious landings, dried out, and fire reliably within minutes. Japanese rifles, while robustly built, were designed for the temperate climate of Manchuria and northern China. In the tropical Pacific, Japanese armory reports captured after the war documented chronic problems with rust, ammunition swelling from humidity, and mechanical failures. These problems worsened as the war continued and Japanese quality control degraded under pressure. The industrial dimension extended to battlefield maintenance and repair. American units carried spare parts for M1 Garands, firing pins, extractors, operating rods, that could be replaced in field conditions by unit armorers. The interchangeability of parts meant that components from any M1 Garand could fit any other, allowing damaged rifles to be quickly restored to service using parts from other weapons. Japanese rifle maintenance, by comparison, often required return to depot-level facilities. Parts weren't always interchangeable even between rifles from the same factory due to hand-fitting during manufacture. As American submarine warfare decimated Japanese shipping, the supply of spare parts to forward areas became increasingly unreliable. By 1944, Japanese units were cannibalizing damaged rifles to keep others in service. Perhaps most significantly, the M1 Garand represented an American industrial philosophy fundamentally different from Japanese practice. American manufacturers prioritized mass production of sophisticated weapons, accepting higher per-unit costs to give every soldier a technological advantage. Japanese planners, operating under severe resource constraints, had chosen to produce larger quantities of simpler weapons, hoping that numbers and fighting spirit would compensate for technological inferiority. The result was visible in every infantry engagement across the Pacific. American rifle squads operated with a confidence born from knowing they possessed superior weapons backed by unlimited ammunition and replacement capacity. Japanese infantry, increasingly aware of their weapons' disadvantage and uncertain whether ammunition and spare parts would arrive, fought with the desperation of soldiers who knew they were outgunned. By the time American forces invaded the Philippines in October 1944, the M1 Garand had become so integral to American tactical doctrine that Japanese defensive planning explicitly centered on avoiding situations where American riflemen could bring their firepower to bear. The weapon had evolved from a technological advantage into a strategic factor that shaped how both sides fought. The Battle of Leyte Gulf and subsequent ground operations demonstrated the weapon's maturity as both Marines and Army personnel had years of combat experience with the rifle. Combat reports from the 1st Cavalry Division and 24th Infantry Division described rifle tactics that would have been impossible with bolt-action weapons. American squads conducted fire and maneuver drills where half the squad provided suppressive fire while the other half advanced, tactics that required sustained fire volume the M1 Garand uniquely provided at the rifle squad level. Japanese forces under General Tomoyuki Yamashita had prepared defensive positions throughout the Philippine Mountains with full understanding of American firepower capabilities. Captured Japanese battle plans from this period show sophisticated defensive arrangements, positions with multiple fallback lines, heavy emphasis on artillery and machine gun fire, minimal reliance on rifle-armed infantry maneuver. These documents explicitly noted that Japanese infantry should avoid extended firefights with American rifle squads. One captured Japanese officer, a company commander with service dating to 1937, provided remarkable testimony during interrogation. He stated, "In China, we could defeat enemy infantry with our rifles and our spirit. In the Philippines, American soldiers have rifles that shoot 8 times without reloading. Our rifles shoot once, then we must work the bolt. We cannot win rifle against rifle. We can only hope to use terrain and artillery." The battle for Manila in February and March 1945 brought urban combat where the M1 Garand's advantages became even more pronounced. In close-quarters building clearing, the ability to fire multiple rapid shots without working a bolt proved decisive. American infantry could enter a room and engage multiple threats in seconds, a capability that fundamentally changed urban warfare tactics. Marine Corps records from Iwo Jima in February 1945 documented another dimension of the M1 Garand's effectiveness. In the volcanic ash and tunnels of that hellish island, Marines found that their rifles continued to function despite conditions that jammed other weapons. The loose tolerances and robust gas system that American engineers had designed into the weapon years earlier proved their worth in the worst conditions imaginable. One Marine, Corporal Howard Mills, later testified about a specific engagement on Iwo Jima's northern sector. His squad encountered Japanese defenders emerging from a tunnel complex. Mills fired his entire 8-round clip in under 5 seconds, reloaded in 3 seconds, and fired another 8 rounds. His testimony noted, "My rifle never stopped. It fired every time I pulled the trigger." Some of the other guys said the same. "We put out so much fire that the Japanese couldn't even shoot back." Japanese defensive doctrine on Iwo Jima, documented in General Tadamaki Kurabayashi's battle orders, showed how completely the M1 Garand had influenced Japanese tactics. Kurabayashi ordered his troops to remain in fortified positions and avoid surface movement during daylight. His reasoning, stated explicitly in captured documents, was that Japanese infantry moving in the open were at catastrophic disadvantage against American rifle fire. The final major Pacific battle at Okinawa from April to June 1945 saw the culmination of 3 years of tactical evolution around the M1 Garand. American rifle companies operated with a confidence and effectiveness that overwhelmed Japanese defenders despite their prepared positions and numerical advantages in certain sectors. The weapon had become so thoroughly integrated into American infantry doctrine that its advantages were almost invisible. Like air superiority, it was simply assumed. The true measure of the M1 Garand's impact lies not in statistics or official reports, but in the testimonies of the men who carried it and those who faced it. These voices, preserved in military archives, veterans' oral histories, and post-war interviews, reveal a weapon that transcended its mechanical specifications to become a symbol of American industrial might and a source of profound psychological impact. Sergeant John Basilone, Medal of Honor recipient who fought at Guadalcanal and later died at Iwo Jima, provided one of the most famous assessments of the M1 Garand. In a 1943 War Bond Tour speech, he stated, "Give me a Marine with an M1 Garand, and he's worth 5 enemy soldiers with their rifles. It's not just the weapon, it's knowing you can keep shooting while the enemy has to work his bolt. That confidence makes you better at everything." Marine Corps oral history archives contain hundreds of similar testimonies. Corporal Eugene Sledge, whose memoir With the Old Breed became a classic account of Pacific combat, wrote, "The M1 was more than our rifle, it was our security blanket. You knew that if you saw an enemy soldier, you could put 8 rounds on target before he could cycle his bolt 3 times. That knowledge kept you alive." Private First Class Robert Leckie, another Marine veteran and author, described a firefight on Peleliu where this advantage proved decisive. A Japanese soldier appeared maybe 40 yards away. Both of us saw each other at the same instant. I fired 4 times before his first shot. He missed. Mine didn't. The M1 saved my life that day and probably 100 other days I don't even remember. The Japanese perspective, harder to document due to the scarcity of survivors and prisoners, nevertheless provides powerful testimony. Post-war interviews conducted by Allied occupation forces and Japanese researchers revealed a consistent narrative. Japanese veterans who survived the war spoke of American rifle fire with a respect that bordered on fear. One Japanese Army veteran, Corporal Tadashi Suzuki, who fought on Luzon, provided testimony to Japanese military historians in 1952. "We knew the Americans had an advantage in artillery, in airplanes, in tanks. But we believed that soldier to soldier, our training and spirit made us equal. Then we faced their rifle squads. Their fire was continuous, like a machine gun but accurate. We could not advance against it. This was when I knew we could not win the war." Another Japanese veteran, Lieutenant Kiyoshi Oka, who defended Iwo Jima, stated in a 1970 interview, "American soldiers could fire many times without stopping. When we looked from our positions and saw them advancing, there was no pause in their shooting. Our soldiers with Arisaka rifles would fire, work the bolt, fire again. The Americans just kept shooting. The sound was different, faster, more continuous. It affected our soldiers' courage." Perhaps most tellingly, Japanese military analysts who studied the Pacific War in the post-war period consistently identified American infantry firepower, centered on the M1 Garand, as a decisive factor. Colonel Masanobu Tsuji, a controversial but respected Japanese staff officer who survived the war, wrote in his 1952 memoir, "Japanese infantry tactics were developed to defeat enemy infantry armed with similar weapons. Against American semi-automatic rifles, our tactics were obsolete before the first battle. We learned this at Guadalcanal but lacked the industrial capacity to respond. The weapon's impact extended beyond those who carried it or faced it." American war correspondents consistently noted the M1 Garand's presence in their dispatches. Ernie Pyle, perhaps the most famous American war correspondent, wrote from the Pacific in 1944, "Watch a Marine rifle squad in action and you understand why we're winning this war. Every man has a rifle that keeps shooting. They advance with fire pouring from their weapons. The Japanese can't match that, and they know it." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The M1 Garand's influence extended far beyond individual engagements to fundamentally reshape American military doctrine in ways that would persist for generations. Before the M1 Garand, infantry tactics worldwide had remained largely unchanged since World War I, emphasizing fire and maneuver at the platoon and company level, with individual riflemen primarily delivering aimed single shots. The M1 Garand enabled a revolutionary concept, the fire team. By 1943, Marine Corps and Army doctrine had evolved to organize rifle squads around the sustained fire capability that the M1 Garand provided. Instead of massing riflemen for volley fire as earlier doctrine prescribed, American squads could split into smaller units, typically 4 men, each capable of delivering suppressive fire while other elements maneuvered. This tactical evolution was documented extensively in revised field manuals issued throughout 1943 and 1944. Field Manual 7-10, Rifle Company, Infantry Regiment, underwent significant revision to incorporate tactics that leveraged semi-automatic rifle fire. The manual now emphasized aggressive movement supported by continuous fire, a stark departure from the more methodical tactics designed around bolt-action rifles. Lieutenant Colonel S.L.A. Marshall, the famous military historian and combat analyst, conducted extensive after-action interviews with American units throughout the Pacific. His research, later compiled in his groundbreaking work on infantry combat, documented how the M1 Garand had psychologically transformed American soldiers. Marshall noted, the soldier with an M1 Garand moved with greater confidence and aggressiveness than soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles. This wasn't merely about firepower, it was about the soldier knowing he could shoot his way out of trouble. Training programs evolved in parallel. Camp Pendleton and other Marine training facilities developed new marksmanship courses emphasizing rapid engagement of multiple targets rather than the traditional emphasis on deliberate aimed fire at single targets. Records from these programs show that recruits were now expected to engage 4 separate targets at 100 yards in under 10 seconds, a requirement that would have been impossible with bolt-action rifles. The tactical doctrine changes rippled through American military organization at every level. Company commanders planned assaults differently, knowing their rifle platoons possessed firepower that previous generations of infantry could only achieve with machine gun support. Battalion operations orders reflected this confidence, with more aggressive timelines and maneuver plans that assumed American infantry could win firefights against numerically superior enemies. Japanese military planners recognized these doctrinal changes and attempted to adapt. Captured Japanese training manuals from 1944 show revised tactics explicitly designed to counter American rifle squads. These manuals emphasized ambushes at extremely close range where the M1 Garand's advantages would be minimized, extensive use of grenades to avoid rifle duels, and immediate withdrawal after initial contact rather than sustained firefights. However, Japanese adaptations could only mitigate, not eliminate, the fundamental advantage American riflemen possessed. Even when Japanese forces successfully implemented their revised tactics, attacking at night, fighting from prepared positions, emphasizing close combat, American rifle fire remained decisive once contact was established. The doctrinal impact extended to combined arms integration. Artillery forward observers, knowing that American infantry could maintain fire superiority during advances, became more willing to call fire danger close to friendly troops. Tank infantry coordination improved because infantry armed with M1 Garands could provide effective local security for armored vehicles without requiring extensive machine gun support. By 1945, American infantry doctrine had been completely restructured around the capabilities the M1 Garand provided. The weapon hadn't merely been adopted into existing tactics, it had forced a complete reimagining of how infantry operated. Platoon leaders, company commanders, and battalion staff officers all planned operations assuming that American riflemen could dominate Japanese riflemen in any direct engagement. This doctrinal transformation represented the M1 Garand's most enduring legacy. Long after the specific battles of the Pacific War faded into history, the tactical principles developed around semi-automatic rifle fire would continue to shape American military thinking. The concept that individual soldiers should possess maximum firepower, that small units should be capable of independent action, that aggressive maneuver supported by sustained fire should be the default approach, all these principles flowed directly from the capabilities the M1 Garand provided. General George C. Marshall, Army Chief of Staff throughout World War II, later wrote that the M1 Garand was the greatest battle implement ever devised. His assessment wasn't merely about the weapon itself, but about how it had enabled American forces to develop tactics and doctrine that proved superior to enemy approaches. The rifle had become the foundation upon which American infantry effectiveness was built. The M1 Garand represented more than a weapon, it became a symbol of American industrial and technological superiority that psychologically affected both American soldiers and their Japanese opponents. Every time a Marine loaded that distinctive 8-round clip, every time the empty clip ejected with its characteristic ping, the weapon reminded everyone within earshot of the vast industrial machine supporting American forces. Japanese soldiers in the Pacific faced not just individual American riflemen, but the entire productive capacity of the United States concentrated into a 9.5-pound rifle. This realization, gradually dawning on Japanese commanders throughout 1942 and 1943, fundamentally altered their understanding of the war they were fighting. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, had famously warned before the war, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." By 1943, Japanese soldiers throughout the Pacific understood exactly what Yamamoto had meant. The M1 Garand, mass-produced in quantities they couldn't match and distributed to every American soldier, represented that awakened giant in tangible form. Statistical analysis conducted by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey after the war quantified the industrial disparity. American factories produced approximately 4.5 million M1 Garand rifles between 1937 and 1945. Japanese factories produced roughly 3.5 million Arisaka rifles of all types during the same period, and Japanese rifles were mechanically simpler and cheaper to manufacture. But the disparity went deeper than production numbers. American logistics delivered M1 Garands and ammunition to soldiers fighting on islands 6,000 miles from California. Japanese logistics struggled to supply their forces fighting on islands 1,500 miles from Tokyo. American submarines and aircraft had effectively severed Japanese supply lines by 1944, while American supply convoys operated with near impunity across the Pacific. Japanese soldiers understood this reality with brutal clarity. Captured diaries and letters from Japanese troops consistently referenced American material superiority. One letter, intercepted by American intelligence in 1944, written by a Japanese soldier on Saipan to his family, stated, "The Americans have everything. Every soldier has a rifle that shoots many times. They have unlimited ammunition. They waste bullets like we waste water. How can we fight such an enemy?" This psychological dimension, the crushing awareness of being materially outmatched, eroded Japanese morale more effectively than any propaganda. Japanese military culture emphasized spiritual strength and willingness to sacrifice, but confronting the M1 Garand in combat demonstrated that spirit alone couldn't overcome industrial capacity. The weapon also affected American soldiers' psychology, though in the opposite direction. Marines and soldiers carrying M1 Garands possessed confidence that came from knowing they held superior weapons. This confidence translated into aggressiveness in combat, willingness to take calculated risks, and reduced combat stress compared to soldiers who felt outgunned. Post-war psychological studies of American veterans documented this effect. Soldiers who carried M1 Garands reported feeling well-equipped and confident in their weapons at rates significantly higher than soldiers in other theaters who used different weapons or fought in earlier wars. This confidence affected combat performance in measurable ways. Soldiers who trust their weapons shoot more accurately, move more deliberately, and make better tactical decisions under stress. The symbolic power of the M1 Garand extended to the American home front. Images of Marines with M1 Garands became iconic representations of American military might in war bond posters, newsreels, and magazines. The weapon communicated a message that resonated with American civilians: their soldiers were equipped with the finest weapons American industry could produce. War production workers took pride in manufacturing components for M1 Garands. Factory newsletters and motivational materials frequently highlighted that the rifles they produced would help American soldiers win firefights against Japanese troops. This direct connection between industrial production and battlefield success boosted morale and productivity in war plants. Japanese propaganda attempted to counter the M1 Garand's symbolic power by claiming Japanese spiritual strength negated American material advantages. Tokyo Rose's broadcasts frequently mocked American dependence on superior weapons, suggesting this revealed weakness rather than strength. But Japanese soldiers fighting in the Pacific knew better. They had faced the M1 Garand in combat, and no amount of propaganda could make them believe spirit could defeat 8 rapid shots. The weapon thus served dual purposes. It was simultaneously a highly effective infantry rifle and a symbol of the industrial war-making capacity that ultimately ensured American victory. Japanese commanders understood by 1944 that they couldn't match American production, couldn't match American logistics, and couldn't develop comparable weapons even if they had the designs. The M1 Garand crystallized this strategic reality into something every soldier on both sides could see and understand. When General Douglas MacArthur accepted Japan's surrender aboard the USS Missouri on September 2, 1945, Marine Honor Guards standing at attention carried M1 Garand rifles. The symbolic weight of that moment, American servicemen holding the weapon that had helped defeat Imperial Japan, was not lost on the Japanese delegation or military historians who would later analyze the Pacific War's outcome. The M1 Garand's influence extended far beyond its service in World War II. The weapon established design principles that would dominate military rifle development for the next half-century. Every major military power began developing semi-automatic or fully automatic rifles in the immediate post-war period, recognizing that the era of bolt-action infantry rifles had permanently ended on Pacific Islands and Philippine jungles. General George S. Patton's famous assessment, calling the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised, has been quoted so often it risks becoming cliché. Yet examining the weapon's actual battlefield impact validates Patton's claim. The M1 Garand gave American infantry a decisive tactical advantage in virtually every engagement. It forced Japanese military doctrine to adapt in ways that ultimately proved futile. It demonstrated that industrial capacity combined with superior design could overcome numerical disadvantages and even exceptional enemy courage. The statistical legacy tells part of the story. Approximately 5.4 million M1 Garand rifles were produced during World War II. They equipped not only American forces but also Allied units, including some Chinese nationalist divisions fighting in the China-Burma-India theater. The rifle served as the primary American infantry weapon through the Korean War and remained in frontline service with some units into the early Vietnam War, a service life spanning 3 decades and 3 major conflicts. But numbers alone cannot capture the M1 Garand's true significance. The weapon represented a fundamental shift in infantry combat philosophy. Before the M1 Garand, infantry tactics assumed that individual riflemen would fire slowly and deliberately, with machine guns providing rapid fire support. The M1 Garand blurred this distinction, giving every rifleman capabilities approaching those of light automatic weapons while maintaining rifle accuracy and reliability. Japanese military analysis conducted during American occupation acknowledged this reality. The 1946 Japanese Defense Ministry report on lessons learned from the Pacific War stated, American infantry superiority derived from multiple factors, but fundamental among these was the semi-automatic rifle issued to every soldier. This weapon advantage, combined with American industrial capacity to provide unlimited ammunition, created combat conditions where Japanese infantry could not achieve tactical success regardless of training or morale. For the American veterans who carried M1 Garands through the Pacific campaigns, the weapon remained a symbol of survival and victory throughout their lives. Veterans organizations and reunions invariably featured the rifle prominently. Many veterans kept deactivated M1 Garands as personal mementos. The distinctive ping of the ejecting in-block clip became one of the most recognizable sounds of American military history, featured in countless films and documentaries. Modern military historians studying the Pacific War have increasingly recognized the M1 Garand as a decisive factor that affected strategic outcomes. While air power, naval supremacy, and industrial capacity were all crucial to Allied victory, the weapon that American infantrymen carried into close combat provided a tactical advantage that cascaded upward to affect operational and strategic levels of warfare. The rifle's influence on Japanese decision-making, particularly the shift from mobile infantry tactics to static defensive warfare, had profound implications. By forcing Japanese forces into fortifications, the M1 Garand created conditions where American advantages in artillery, air power, and armor could be most effectively applied. Japanese commanders, unable to maneuver effectively against American rifle fire, essentially trapped themselves in positions where American combined arms superiority could systematically destroy them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.